The docking clamps shuddered as the shuttle locked into place, a sound like two metal titans whispering gossip behind a steel curtain. I exhaled, adjusted the collar of my diplomat's jacket, and tried not to sweat through the starch. The Velsharan embassy assistant who greeted me looked like someone had stapled a chandelier to a mannequin, graceful, angular, and utterly unimpressed with my Earth-standard grin. "Delegate Ward," it said with a melodic hum. "The Queen awaits." I was escorted through hallways that defied Euclidean geometry. The floors subtly sloped upward and sideways at the same time. Either Velsharan architects hated gravity, or they wanted to ensure no human walked straight here without a mild existential crisis. Columns stretched like molten crystal, refracting soft violet light across everything. My face appeared in 1,000 fragmented reflections, most of which looked less diplomatic and more mildly seasick. I cleared my throat as we approached the throne chamber, if you could call it that. The room was spherical, floating platforms orbiting a glowing central dais like obedient moons. She stood there, Queen Selari of Velshara, her radiance of the fifth harmonic lineage, wielder of the Starban scepter, commander of light and whisper, and other titles I'd long stopped remembering after the third PowerPoint slide. She didn't sit. Queens here didn't lower themselves onto furniture. She hovered, tall and serene, her irises the color of nebulae, ears elongated and gracefully curved like crescent moons. The court surrounded her, dozens of advisors, envoys, and what I was almost certain was a sentient curtain. Her gaze locked onto mine like a tractor beam. I wasn't staring, I was studying, observing, scientifically, for diplomacy. "Why are you looking at me?" she asked, her voice soft and sharp as an obsidian blade dipped in honey. "Because you're dazzling," I said, too quickly, too honestly. The silence that followed could have frozen a supernova mid-flare. Somewhere in the crowd, a noble gasped audibly, probably preparing to write a formal complaint on an 8-meter-long scroll. But then, something curious. The Queen blinked once. Her cheeks shifted in hue from opalescent white to the faintest lavender. Not protocol-polite amusement, not diplomatic performance, a blush. The moment passed as quickly as it came. She straightened, ears twitching once, then folded her hands. "Delegate Ward, shall we proceed to discuss the terms of atmospheric extraction rights?" "Of course, Your Radiance," I replied, still slightly stunned. "But only if you promise not to weaponize that gaze again. I wasn't briefed for that." A few of the court attendants exchanged glances. The Queen's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smirk. The negotiation table wasn't a table at all. It was a floating sheet of synchronized plasma, projecting data midair like an angry slideshow. I tried to look serious, while a particularly enthusiastic graph kept slapping me in the face with projected helium yield percentages. "Earth proposes joint custody of mineral rights 50-50, I offered. "Velshara finds such division primitive. We prefer harmonic equity," she said. "Which means—" She gestured, and the table projected a spiraling fractal of light. A weighted rotational exchange based on orbital proximity, resource resonance, and lunar emotional alignment. "That last one's a joke, right?" "Silence. I mean, unless your moon really does have moods, in which case I'm both sorry and very, very intrigued." She exhaled. Was that a sigh or a suppressed laugh? "Delegate, do you often find humor in the gravest of matters?" "Only when I'm deeply out of my depth, and trying not to hyperventilate in front of royalty." This time she did smile. A small, deliberate one, like she was granting me a privilege normally reserved for endangered species or emotionally fragile diplomats. The negotiations continued with less tension than I'd expected. At one point her chief archivist, a floating cube that spoke in haikus, objected to my phrasing. I responded in a limerick. It caused a minor cultural incident, but earned me points for linguistic audacity. Hours passed. Gravity shifted twice. I was offered something called spore tea that made my vision briefly expand into the ultraviolet. I politely declined the second cup, By the time the treaty draft hovered between us in golden script, I was more than a little dizzy, and not just from the spores. "Your world is chaotic," Salari said. "That's just the charm of Earth. Half chaos, half coffee, all improvisation." "Improvise too much," she said, "and you lose structure. Structure's overrated. Sometimes the best moments are unscripted." She looked at me again. This time her expression was unreadable. "You believe so?" "I do." She stepped down from her platform, an act that sent a visible ripple through her court. An advisor almost fainted, or short-circuited. Hard to tell. "You've breached etiquette," she said softly, coming to stand within arm's length. "I tend to do that." "And yet," she said, "you're still alive, curious." "I like to think of it as being charmingly durable." She didn't laugh, but her eyes lingered just a moment longer than they should have. "I think I'll allow it," she said, then turned. "For now." As the court disbanded and the floating platforms realigned, I followed her, feeling like I'd just passed a test no one had explained to me. A test with no grading curve, laser-eyed judges, and one very long-eared, dazzling monarch. I wasn't sure if I'd just negotiated a treaty, made a cosmic faux pas, or been recruited into some intergalactic sitcom. But one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be just another mission. This was the beginning of a very strange, possibly wonderful, and almost certainly dangerous chapter. And if I survived it with my sense of humor intact, I'd consider that a diplomatic miracle. The door to the Queen's private observatory slid open with a hiss that sounded suspiciously judgmental. I was led inside by the same crystal-limbed attendant who'd greeted me earlier and still looked like it hoped I'd trip over my own diplomacy. The room pulsed with dim blue light from stars beyond the panoramic wall, each glimmer shifting across Salari's silhouette as she stood facing the void. "You summoned me," I said, immediately regretting how dramatic that sounded. She didn't turn. "I wish to understand your species." "Well, we're messy, emotional, highly combustible, and inexplicably obsessed with hot beverages." I paused. "Also, we invented karaoke." "Is that a form of weapon?" "Only when performed by someone named Todd after 3 glasses of Synthil." She finally turned to face me, her expression halfway between stern inquiry and thinly veiled amusement. I took a step in, carefully avoiding a floating platform covered in data tablets and what looked suspiciously like a glowing bowl of fruit that might bite back. "I meant on a deeper level," she said, "beyond your chaos and your beverages." I folded my arms. "You mean why we do what we do? Why you look at monarchs and say they are dazzling?" I winced. So we're still on that. "Your words destabilized protocol." "Wasn't my goal, I was just being honest." She walked toward one of the glass walls, touching a panel. A holographic projection shimmered into existence, images of Earth, compiled from diplomatic files. Cities glowing at night, forests breathing with wind, oceans swirling in unfiltered storm. She studied them like they were riddles. "You speak of honesty like it is a tool," she said. "On Velshara, honesty is dangerous. I've noticed, it makes people blush and short-circuit." Salari turned to me again, this time with one brow arched. "You are not like the other delegates. They're better groomed. You're unpredictable." That's either a compliment or a complaint dressed as a compliment. She didn't respond. Instead, she gestured toward the hovering fruit. "You will taste this." "Is this one of those tests, where if I eat the wrong thing I get vaporized?" "No, that would be considered excessive." "Great, low bar for hospitality, but I'll take it." I approached the bowl. The fruit looked like it was breathing, slow pulses of green and amber under a translucent skin. I picked one up. It shivered. "This thing just moved." "It is empathic. It reflects emotional resonance." "Of the eater." "Of the moment." "Right, totally normal, just like eating mood-swing sushi." I bit into it. The taste exploded like electricity laced with cinnamon and nostalgia. My knees buckled slightly. "You are overwhelmed." "It tastes like my grandmother's attic, but if it were on fire, and also full of jazz." Salari's ears twitched in amusement. "Interesting." You do realize this is the weirdest first date I've ever been on. This is not a date. Then your hospitality department needs a memo. Mood fruit and starry views, classic setup. She didn't argue, which was, frankly, terrifying. We sat on cushions that adjusted themselves based on posture, comfort, and possibly ego. A soft hum filled the room as the glass wall dimmed to focus on a cluster of stars forming the Velscherin crest. You find this amusing, she said. I find everything mildly ridiculous. It helps. You laugh in the face of complexity. I laugh in the face of everything, usually because I don't know what else to do. That is foreign to us. I know that's why I'm here. She studied me for a long moment. I got the distinct impression she wasn't seeing my face so much as scanning the blueprint of my species. Your mind, she said quietly, is loud. I've been told. Chaotic, rapid, unfiltered. Well, it's full of trivia, bad jokes, and a deep existential fear of moths. You fear moths. Not all moths, just the really aggressive ones. We had one in the embassy last year that buzzed like a chainsaw. She blinked slowly. You are making this up. I wish I was. She looked down at her hands. I envy that, the ability to bend discomfort into humor. You could try it. I am not designed for levity. Neither was Earth, but we still tell jokes during hurricanes. Another silence, not heavy this time, curious. Celari reached into a panel and produced a small sphere. This is a neural mimic core, she said. It creates simulations based on shared thought patterns. And you're giving me one because I wish to understand how your mind works. I feel like I should warn you. It's mostly movie quotes and weird metaphors. She handed me the sphere. It hummed gently. Place your fingers here. I did. The air shimmered. The observatory vanished. In its place appeared a beach I hadn't seen in years. White sand, synthetic umbrellas, a cheap radio playing early 21st century jazz fusion. My memory, a family trip. Celari looked around. Her formal composure cracked just slightly. This is bright. It's Earth's idea of paradise. Fake sunscreen, real sunburn. Children ran through the surf. A dog barked somewhere off-screen. My mother's laugh echoed from nowhere and everywhere. This is your piece, Celari said, almost to herself. One of them. She closed her eyes. When they opened, we stood in a different place. Her memory now. Vast towers of light stretching into black sky, symphonies playing in the neural background, thousands of Velscherin standing in absolute, reverent silence. My coronation, she said. It looks like an opera. It was. We stood at the center of it all, she in regalia, me suddenly aware I was wearing shorts. You were so composed, I said. I was terrified. We locked eyes, no projection this time. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither are you. The observatory reappeared. The sphere dimmed. The silence this time felt like a question neither of us had the training to answer. Then she stood. Tomorrow, the court will summon you for formal review. Should I bring another compliment or another fruit? She paused, her lips curved into the faintest smile. Bring both. And with that, she walked away. Her footsteps echoing through a room that suddenly felt less like a palace and more like the first page of something dangerously unscripted. The Court of Harmonic Review did not believe in chairs. That was the first thing I noticed. Or rather, didn't notice, as I stood there for what felt like an hour, my spine doing its best impression of a support beam on the verge of early retirement. 18 counselors formed a semicircle around me on floating discs, each wearing robes that shimmered with shifting constellations. I half expected one of them to pull out a flute and summon a weather pattern. Delegate Ward, one of them said, his voice droning like a lecture at 3 a.m., you have been summoned to clarify your influence on her radiance. Clarify, not justify, that's a relief. Another counselor, a tall figure with 6 fingers and the personality of a sleep-deprived librarian, interrupted. Your informality has destabilized her harmonic output. I destabilize a lot of things, I said. Usually elevators and small talk. Royal harmonic output is a new one. There was a flash from the central platform and Queen Selari entered. Everyone bowed. I half bowed. The platform dipped as if insulted. She moved to the central node and touched the console. The air vibrated with a low hum as translucent sigils floated above us, a representation of her recent thought patterns. The council murmured. Her harmonic resonance is erratic, one said. Erratic. I raised an eyebrow. Maybe she's just in a good mood. A deviation of this magnitude has not been recorded since the era of first reversal, said the six-fingered one, who I mentally nicknamed Counselor Mood Killer. Selari glanced at me. Explain. I made a joke about socks. A pause. The council leaned forward in perfect synchronization. It was unsettling. You caused harmonic irregularity with footwear. She asked why Earth garments lacked symmetry. I said socks vanish in dryers because it's a ritual sacrifice to the laundry gods. Silence. Then, a spark of color flickered across her ears. Not a blush, more like a shimmer of amusement she tried very hard to hide. This, another counselor muttered, is not how diplomacy is conducted. I agree, I said, which is why it's working. That earned a full octave of offense from three of them. One even dropped his scroll. A holographic replay activated in the chamber. It showed our interaction from the observatory. My awkward grin, the fruit tasting, the beach memory. Mood Killer squinted at the projection. What is the significance of this aquatic terrain? That's a beach, I said. It's where humans go to get sunburned and existential. Why would anyone desire such a location? We don't. We just like pretending we do. Selari's voice cut through. The memory offered insight into his cultural context. More like a window into my subconscious chaos, I added. Your humor is invasive, another counselor accused. And yet no one's burst into flames, so far. There was a pause. Selari turned to the council. I am not under duress. Delegate Ward's behavior is unconventional, but he has offered perspective that most of our allies have not. A new voice, colder and slower, rose from the back of the chamber. Minister Vorat. He glided forward on a low hovering disc, dressed in ceremonial armor that looked like it had never known joy. This delegate compromises our sovereign dignity, Vorat declared. He has introduced cognitive noise into her radiance's harmonic pattern. It is corruption. You say corruption, I said. I say jazz. Several counselors gasped. Selari's ear twitched. Vorat's eyes narrowed. You are a disruptor. I prefer catalyst for mutual understanding. Also, part-time chaos consultant. You think this is amusing. Only because it is. He raised a hand and the room darkened. The central projection shifted, displaying a map of neural symphony patterns. Selari's line, previously smooth, now showed fluctuations. She is at risk, he said, of emotional entanglement with an alien. The word alien hit like a gavel. I resisted the urge to remind them they were the aliens in this room, from my point of view. Selari stood straighter. Minister Vorat forgets that the purpose of this diplomatic exchange is understanding. And yet, Vorat said, this understanding weakens your mind. Your harmonic core is vulnerable. Or expanding, she said. That silenced him. I half expected a glitch. He recovered. Then prove it, he said. Link again. Open the mimic core. Show that this connection has not made you weak. Selari looked at me. Would you consent? I shrugged. Sure, but you're about to see a memory involving chili sauce and an unfortunate misunderstanding of alien restrooms. She approached. The mimic core activated. The air shimmered. The projection showed a memory from my early days on Mars Station Theta, a mislabeled container, a diplomatic dinner, a hot sauce made from synthetic pepper concentrate. I'd mistaken it for sweet glaze. What followed was 10 minutes of trying to look composed while internally screaming. Selari watched with a blank face. Vorat stared in horror. One counselor winced. Another chuckled, then quickly pretended they didn't. The memory faded. That, Vorat said, is absurd. Exactly, I said, and yet I survived, with my dignity mostly intact. Celari turned to the court. It is not weakness to experience the unpredictable. It is strength to endure it and laugh. Voret's platform rotated slowly, stiffly. We shall review this further. The council dispersed. I waited as Celari approached. You held up well. I've been through worse. Once got stuck in a malfunctioning airlock with a sentient vending machine. She nodded, then glanced sideways. You embarrass easily. I consider it a human defense mechanism. You make jokes in serious matters. I find that serious matters often need jokes more than the unserious ones. She looked at me. You intrigue me, delegate. Good, I'd hate to be boring. Her ears shimmered again. Your mind, Elias, is unpredictable. You're repeating yourself, your radiance. No, she said. This time it is not a warning. And just like that, the court chamber emptied. But the echo of something unspoken remained, swirling between us like star dust caught in gravity neither of us fully understood. The diplomatic garden wasn't exactly a garden. It was more like a biosphere curated by someone who'd only read about Earth ecosystems in an outdated galactic trivia manual. The trees glowed faintly, the grass hummed when stepped on, and the flowers blinked if you looked at them too long. I once made direct eye contact with a blue vine and it winked back. I've had relationships less intimate. Queen Celari walked beside me, hands folded behind her back, her steps precise but unhurried. She wore something simpler today, which in Velsuran terms meant only 2 layers of interwoven crystal fiber instead of 6. This garden, she said, was designed to promote interspecies calm during negotiations. It hums when I walk. That is intentional. I'm not sure if that's charming or unsettling. For humans, it's often both. We strolled past a pool that reflected the sky incorrectly. I could see stars above us in the water, but the real sky was blank with daylight. When I bent over to look closer, my reflection did finger guns. I blinked and looked at Celari. Okay, that's new. The reflection pool adapts to individual subconscious patterns. Mine thinks it's hilarious. You did threaten to finger gun the entire High Council yesterday. I said I could, not that I would. She paused by a blossom that released a light scent of citrus and static. The court is still divided, she said. Voret has gathered support from isolationist houses. Because of me. Partly, mostly because you're you. Ah yes, the unstoppable force of personality known as mildly charming human with a tendency to improvise. And provoke. And survive so far. She turned toward me. The ceremony is tomorrow. The joint declaration. Yes, a symbol of unity between our peoples. We will address the council together. Is this the part where I wear something shiny and pretend to know what I'm doing? I assumed that was already your method. I'm deeply offended, I said, but also impressed. She gave me a look that might have been amusement or diplomatic fatigue. With her, it was hard to tell. Ahead of us, a soft chime rang from the garden's perimeter. A pair of Celari's personal guards appeared, their crystalline armor humming with low-frequency tones. One stepped forward. Radiance. There's been a breach. Celari's posture shifted, every muscle alert. Where? North Quarter, Level 3. Drone sentries disabled. Possible infiltration by unknown agents. I blinked. Well, that's not very calming. You will return to the palace interior. With all due respect, no. She raised a brow. No. I've survived allergic reactions to 3 different alien snacks. I think I can handle 1 infiltration. Your logic is flawed. Flawed logic has kept me alive longer than training ever did. She gave the slightest nod, then turned to her guard. Bring us there. We were escorted through a series of crystalline tunnels that warped light as we passed, making my limbs look 10 feet long and vaguely amphibious at certain points. If that was supposed to deter intruders, it was doing a great job of unsettling me. When we arrived at the breach site, a drone lay smoking on the floor, its sensor array cut clean through. Precision slicing, the guard noted. Laser-based, Velsharan tech. Friendly fire, I asked. Or internal sabotage, Celari said. From the shadows ahead, a movement fast, sharp. The guard moved forward, but Celari stopped him. A voice rang out, filtered, mechanical. The Alliance endangers Velshara. The Queen is compromised. Celari stepped forward. Show yourself. The figure emerged, a Velsharan but not court-aligned. His markings were old nobility, but his gear was tactical, rebel, disavowed. You lowered your defenses for an alien, he said. Your patterns are corrupted. Celari's voice remained level. You broke protocol, attacked my drone sentries, and now claim moral superiority. You allow outsiders into sacred mindspace. I cleared my throat. Technically, she invited me. He raised a weapon, slim and glowing. You will leave this world. I stepped beside Celari. Can we at least negotiate terms? Maybe a polite disagreement over tea. The weapon whined to life. The guard raised his own, but Celari held out her hand. No blood in the garden. Instead, she activated her scepter. Light flared and a pulse of harmonic energy burst from her, knocking the attacker flat without drawing blood. He writhed, stunned, and his weapon fizzled. Take him to containment, she said. As guards dragged the intruder away, she turned to me. That was a warning. You handled it well. I should not have to. No, I said, but the fact that you did says something. She looked at me more weary than angry. They will not stop. Neither will I. Her eyes narrowed. That's either noble or reckless. Probably both. The rest of the walk back to the palace was quiet. We passed a corridor where the lights flickered in rhythmic pulses. Velsharan music played in frequencies only a few species could perceive. I heard just enough to know it was beautiful. At the chamber entrance, she stopped. If you speak tomorrow, she said, speak as you are. I wasn't planning to impersonate anyone. They will resist. They usually do. Do not joke too much. I'll ration myself. She looked at me long and steady. I find your presence destabilizing. I get that a lot. She didn't smile, but she also didn't walk away. I am no longer certain what will happen tomorrow, she said. Good, I replied. That's how you know it's worth doing. She nodded once, stepped inside, and the doors closed behind her. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty hallway, wondering if I was being brave, stupid, or just very tired. Probably all three. The ceremony began at orbital dawn, which meant nothing to anyone not raised on Velshara, but I was told it was symbolically significant and absolutely mandatory to look alert. I hadn't slept. Not from nerves, though those were plenty, but because my translator implant kept buzzing with ceremonial vocabulary it didn't recognize. At one point, it translated a greeting as, "May your genes spiral joyfully." I decided to roll with it. The Hall of Concordance shimmered with the usual impractical majesty. Levitating walkways, bioluminescent air currents, and a choir of winged organisms singing a note just shy of human hearing. I kept nodding as if I understood what was happening, but my inner monologue had entered the winging it stage of diplomacy. Celari stood beside me, more composed than anyone had the right to be under the scrutiny of 7 planetary representatives, 32 council members, and 1 human ambassador wearing diplomatic robes that still smelled faintly of emergency fabric glue. She glanced at me once, her eyes unreadable. Minister Vorat delivered a speech. It was exactly as warm and inspiring as being scolded by a sentient filing cabinet. He listed the dangers of rapid interspecies intimacy, the erosion of tradition, and what he called cultural harmonics destabilized by terrestrial wit. Then came our turn. Celari stepped forward first. We gather not because our histories align, but because our futures demand it. She paused just long enough for gravitas, then continued. This unity is not forged through symmetry. It is forged through tension, resilience, and yes, the unpredictable. That was my cue. I walked to the podium, cleared my throat, and immediately knocked over a ceremonial orb with my elbow. It rolled across the stage and bounced once before settling under a diplomat's floating chair. I nodded. Symbolic gesture. That's how we humans demonstrate humility. Scattered laughter from Celari's court. Voret flinched. I'm not here to offer more charts or recite protocol. I'm here because two people from two different species found something we didn't expect understanding. I looked at her, and maybe a little chaos. I glanced back at the audience. Yes, I joked. Yes, I broke rules, but I also listened, and I learned. That laughter doesn't diminish respect, it builds it. That difference doesn't weaken harmony, it makes it real. Celari stepped beside me again. Together, we activated the declaration crystal, binding the treaty through a neural pulse that rippled out across the hall, a shimmering wave of combined data and intent. The air thickened, then relaxed. The bond was made. The applause that followed wasn't loud. Velsharans weren't known for noise, but the resonance in the air told me it was genuine. Even the floating curtain ambassador quivered approvingly. That night the palace hosted a celebration. Not a traditional feast, because Velsharans absorbed nutrients through high-frequency exposure to irradiated minerals, but they made accommodations. Someone handed me a plate of something that looked like fried static. It tasted like lightning and regret. Celari appeared beside me on the terrace, her hair reflecting the light of twin moons. You survived the ceremony. I consider that a major win. You altered the mood of the council. I try to keep things lightly disoriented. She looked at me. The treaty is signed, your mission is concluded. I nodded. Technically, I should return to Earth, file a report. Get promoted to guy who didn't ruin everything. But I watched the horizon, but I'm not the same guy who arrived here. She didn't respond, just waited. When I came, I thought diplomacy meant saying what people wanted to hear. Turns out, sometimes it means saying something real and dealing with the fallout. She studied me, so what will you do? I could go back, pretend I wasn't changed. Or I met her gaze, or I stay, not as a delegate, not as a symbol, just as me. Silence stretched, then you are still unpredictable. I'm told that's my charm. She smiled, a real one, then stay. I nodded, one condition. She raised an eyebrow. No more empathic fruit without warning. Agreed. Weeks passed. Voret formally stepped down, citing a need for long-term recalibration. The court, now less rigid, allowed joint cultural councils. Earth musicians arrived to teach jazz. Velsharan composers tried to replicate it using harmonic wind spheres. It was mostly chaos,